Okay, so let's jump right in with a kind of paradox. You've got this massive resource oil, and it's buried, deep under the
For
desert.
miles down, completely out of sight.
Exactly. And you'd think the people in charge are the guys who own the land or the ones with the drills.
That's the logical assumption, right? The power should be with the asset.
But the real story, and this is what's so wild, is how that dark stuff underground actually starts dictating everything on the surface. We're talking politics,
Yeah.
redrawing borders, creating these immense, unbelievable fortunes.
It is the ultimate case study in geology creating geopolitics.
Yeah.
And it happens so fast. And today, for our deep dive, we are really getting into the architecture of that power, all through the story of a name that, well, it should be famous, but most people have never heard it. Calouste Gulbenkian.
Gulbenkian. Our sources are just laser focused on him. He was known as Mr. 5%, and we have to stop on that name for a second. Mr. 5%.
Yeah.
This is a guy who, at the absolute peak of the Middle East oil rush, held a tiny single-digit piece of the pie, the Turkish Petroleum Company.
Right, which later became the IPC.
He was an investor, a deal maker, and he famously never even set foot on an oil tanker, not once. And yet, this is the guy holding the key to the entire game.
And that's our mission for this deep dive. We have to understand why. We're trying to look past the simple story of corporate greed. Our source material argues that this whole history is really defined by three much deeper sort of systemic principles. So we're not just looking at a conflict, we're diving into the structural design, the hidden rules of power.
Okay, so let's unpack him first. The man himself, Gulbenkian. He's this Armenian figure operating between empires. He's not a prime minister, he's not a general with an army, but somehow he is standing right at the center of every single critical negotiation. Shell, Anglo-Persian, what we now call BP Standard Oil, the French government, they all have to go through him.
And this is what we have to call the 5% paradox. It's such a core insight, and I mean, you can apply it to almost any industry today. The idea is that your percentage, it's less important than your position.
Okay, say more about that.
Well, Gulbenkian didn't have the majority stake, not even close. But he engineered his position to be the one immovable pivot point. He didn't own the whole house, but he controlled the keyhole to the front door.
So he didn't need to outrun everyone in the race.
No.
He just had to stand in the one spot where every single player had to pass to get on the field. But I mean, holding just 5%, that sounds so risky. How did he stop the other 95%, these huge nation-backed corporations from just, ganging up on him and writing him out of the deal?
That's the beauty of the architecture. See, his 5% wasn't just an investment. It was a mandatory prerequisite for the whole cooperation agreement that formed the company in the first place. He positioned himself as the essential bridge, first between the British and the Ottoman government, and then later between all the competing European and American interests.
So he was the one guy who could make the deal happen.
And critically, the one guy who could make it fall apart. His share was it was a non-negotiable and guaranteed his seat at the table forever.
And his whole personality, his philosophy, it just perfectly matched this kind of high leverage position. Our sources paint this picture of a man fueled by just relentless skepticism.
Oh, completely.
He didn't trust a single report from these big companies he was dealing with. He cross-checked everything. He had his own private spy teams doing due diligence.
On everything from geology to local politics?
Yeah. And he demanded third-party experts to value every single purchase.
It was a philosophy born out of survival, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, for a man living between collapsing empires with massive opportunity on one side and the constant danger of being, politically or financially erased on the other, trust was a liability.
A liability, not an asset.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He didn't sign deals based on a handshake and goodwill. He insisted on ironclad mechanisms of control and verifiable information. That skepticism, that was his insurance policy.
Which brings us to the real driver of this whole historical moment. If Gulbenkian is operating with total skepticism, what's driving the empires? The British, the French, the Americans. And our sources introduce principle number 1. The engine isn't simple greed. It's something much deeper. A profound structural fear of shortage.
This is such a critical distinction.
Yeah.
Because greed is a desire for more.
I want a bigger slice of the pie.
Right. But the fear of shortage, that's the terror of losing the pie you already have, losing everything. And think about the implication of that fear. When a nation decides that a resource, in this case oil, is an absolute condition of its existence.
Its industrial power, its military might.
Everything. That resource stops being a simple commodity you can buy and sell. It becomes an existential need.
And when something becomes an existential need, that urgency justifies Well, basically anything.
Any action, you compromise your principles, you get into these shady deals. You start to believe the stakes are so high that they excuse any move you have to make.
We saw it play out immediately. The British realize their whole navy runs on oil, so they declare it a top priority. Their entire foreign policy bends around securing it.
Then you have the French, who are just desperate to keep up. They literally trade the entire city and region of Mosul to the British.
Just for a guaranteed share in the oil company?
Just for a share. And the Americans, they're terrified of being locked out of the Middle East by these European cartels. So they come in and forcefully demand an open-door policy. They basically threaten the diplomatic war if they don't get a seat at that table.
Every single move is rooted in that fear, the fear of running dry.
And nothing, nothing, illustrates the sheer, terrifying stakes like the story of the Baba Gurgur oil well eruption in Iraq. This was 1927. They had been drilling for years, mostly because Gulbenkian had insisted the potential in that region was huge.
And when the drill finally hit, the scale of it was just almost beyond comprehension.
It wasn't a slow leak. It was instantaneous. It was biblical. Oil just erupted 140 feet into the air, a geyser that went on for weeks.
And the toxic gas?
It threatened entire villages. They had to mobilize hundreds of people just to dig trenches to contain this river of crude oil. It proved, in the most spectacular way possible, that the fear of shortage was rational, because the potential reward was just as immense and just as sudden.
That spectacle, that's the ultimate wake-up call, isn't it?
It is.
The sources have this great quote from Georges Clemenceau, the French leader. He initially just dismissed the oil problem. He thought he could, buy whatever France needed at the grocery counter.
Oh, it sounds so quaint now, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But that was the pre-war mindset. It was profoundly naive. And his change of heart really illustrates this global shift. After World War I, he gets it. Oil isn't a consumer good. It's systemic power.
Right. You can't wait until you're desperate for something that defines your national security to just go shopping for it.
No. It forced everyone to shift from being consumers to being architects of the whole supply chain.
And that transition, that leads us right to principle 3. Boundaries aren't just on maps, they're drawn in the mind. This is the idea that gives birth to the famous Red Line Agreement, 1928.
The Red Line Agreement it's arguably the most important piece of paper in modern energy history. It wasn't just a treaty, it was an organizational mechanism designed to kill destructive competition. Gulbenkian himself supposedly drew the line on a map with a red pencil, basically around the old borders of the Ottoman Empire.
And what did that line actually mandate? What were the rules?
The rule was simple, but it was absolute. All the partners, Gulbenkian's 5%, the big European firms, the Americans, they took a contractual oath. Within this zone, we must only play together.
Oh.
No single partner could go off and look for oil on their own.
Right.
No independent deals, no side hustles. It created a forced cartel, all to prevent the kind of internal rivalry that would just drive prices and profits into the ground.
So the psychology here is fascinating, this massive cooperation. It wasn't born out of friendship.
Not at all.
Or mutual trust or shared values. It was born out of a shared fear.
Exactly. The fear of a free-for-all. Unfettered competition that could destroy every single one of them. Alliances like this, they often emerge from shared vulnerability, not shared strength. They built a cooperative fence to protect their own interests from each other.
And if we bring it back to Gulbenkian, his self-definition suddenly makes perfect sense. He always said he was a corporate architect, not an oil merchant.
Yes.
He wasn't focused on selling the barrels of crude. He was designing the rules of the game itself, and that's how he guaranteed his position. He knew that the rules, not the product, are what really control the world. Okay, so let's pivot to the listener. What does all of this mean for you? You're navigating your own career, your business, in what can feel like a high-stakes world. If this macro game of empires is governed by these principles, fear, positioning, architecture, what are the sort of painful tactical lessons we can take away?
Well, the first lesson really shifts your whole focus. Don't live by grocery items. Live by system. Think about it. Gulbenkian didn't wait until the oil was flowing to try and buy his way in. He built the contractual system decades in advance.
So for you, that means you can't wait until you're desperate for a solution, whether that's knowledge or a strong network or financial reserves, to try and go buy it off the shelf.
It's too late. You have to build that system beforehand.
That means investing in your knowledge, cultivating relationships, having personal discipline, maintaining your health, all of that, because a crisis just reveals the system you already built.
Exactly. And the second lesson applies that choke point principle. Power is in the right position, not the loud voice. You don't need the biggest budget or the spotlight. You need to find the choke point in your field, in your company.
And that choke point isn't always obvious, is it? It could be a unique skill that connects, say, the tech guys to the marketing team.
Or a rare competence that speeds up a critical process. A role where the whole system just slows down, or even risks collapse without your specific input.
So you don't need to be the wealthiest or the most famous person in the room. You just need to be the one holding the essential key, the 5% that makes the other 95% work.
The third lesson is about time. Strategic endurance. And the idea is patience is holding ground, not simply waiting. Gulbenkian waited almost 30 years from his initial interest until that Baba Gurgur well erupted.
30 years.
Because he'd done his homework. He knew the deep geology, as he called it, would eventually speak for him. So he just endured. He protected his position and accumulated power while he waited.
So in your own life, you have to identify the geology of your industry, the deep structural shifts that are coming, and then make sure your skills or your platform can outlast the superficial trends. You accumulate deeply until your work just naturally erupts and proves itself.
And that last lesson is so vital for navigating any kind of modern alliance. Do not mistake cooperation for trust. The Red Line Agreement was a massive, decades-long cooperation built on one thing: mutual strategic interest and shared fear.
It's transactional.
Completely. Cooperation is a useful strategy. It's conditional. Trust, on the other hand, that's a relational choice. It requires shared values.
And being clear-eyed about that distinction is essential. You can enter into strategic alliances, knowing they might be temporary, without being naive about what's driving the other people involved.
You can cooperate strategically without ever having to surrender your own self-interest or your skepticism.
So to wrap up this deep dive, what really stands out is that people aren't just manipulated by, physical resources. They're manipulated by the fear of shortage in their own minds.
That's it, the fear you don't have enough time, enough money, enough skill.
And when you let that scarcity mindset drive your actions, that's when you become willing to trade your principles for some kind of short-term, desperate gain.
And healing that fear. That is the ultimate way to step out of these invisible conflicts.
It's just a remarkable story. Gulbenkian completes his great deal at 59. His fortune is made, his legacy is secure, and he never, not once, physically saw an oil tanker carrying the product he controlled.
He never touched the crude. He touched the rules.
And the rules control the world. So for you, the listener, if you want to be an architect of your own life instead of just a player in the game, here are the 3 final takeaways. First, don't let the fear of shortage make you trade your core principles. Second, stop chasing superficial, high-visibility power. Find the essential key position where you create unique, irreplaceable value.
And finally, don't just spend your life running after things you're afraid you lack. Learn how to stop working within the game and start designing your own game. Use structure, use position to create your own long-term stability. The goal is to start living as an architect, not as someone constantly running from one manufactured shortage to the next.